Hi everyone, nice and crisp Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Action Bronson record, White Bronco. TV host, foodie, actor, he's going to be in an upcoming Scorsese film, and rapper Action Bronson from Queens, New York. He's back, and he has a lot of irons in the fire. And despite the fact that he does have one of the biggest and most charismatic personalities in hip-hop right now, this new brief album of his makes me wonder how much a priority that is for him at the moment. Sure, Bronson's trademark boasts and sense of humor are laced throughout the 11 tracks and 26 minutes of this thing, but the songs on this record feel more sketchy than they do fully realized. For the most part, this record doesn't really offer much in terms of a hook or structure or a coherent idea, shift in style or evolution, theme. It mostly just feels like riffing over some really basic loops until the track is padded out for a minute or two, and then it's either faded out or segued with a sample or something. Frankly, it feels kind of low effort for Bronson. Granted, Bronson's recent material hasn't really been his best or his most consistent, Blue Chip 7000, Mr. Wonderful, but at least those albums felt a little bit more fully conceived, and even though there were some ill-conceived lows, those records still had some pretty exciting highs. On White Bronco, Bronson isn't really packing these tracks with his best work, with his worst work, or really with much of anything. I mean, the title track, it's not exactly a long cut. It takes around a minute for Bronson to actually start rapping with these really jazzy electric piano chords taking a long time to set the tone. And there's an incredibly strung out outro to the track too, with a really rambly refrain about Bronson living his best life, which, I mean, maybe he is, because it does not sound like he's straining at all to make this. Throughout this entire track, there was only one line that stood out to me, I'm like a father to these bastards, shut the fuck up, eat your pudding, 20 alligators died for the shit I put my foot in, which as a vegan, the line breaks my heart, but it's friggin' funny. But this album needs a lot more than Bronson just being humorous in order for it to make it a great LP that I want to return to. It's like just a bunch of random freestyles over samples that kind of throw it back to the days of classic funk and soul, with a bit of jazz fusion mixed in here and there, and some familiar faces on the production too, like Knowledge and Party Supplies and La Musica de Harry Fraud, who puts Bronson and A$AP Rocky over a cloud rap cut on the very tail end of the record. A song that I didn't really care for at first, but it's kind of grown on me in the context of this album, maybe because in a weird way it's one of the more fleshed out and satisfying songs on the entire record. Doesn't sound as unfinished as a lot of the other material here, and it's pretty rare that you hear Bronson over this style of beat. And while I do like the musical aesthetic and flavor of the instrumentals on this record, they're not the most detailed or varied beats that I've ever heard Bronson on. For the most part, it feels like a diminished version of what we've heard already in his back catalog on mixtapes like Rare Chandeliers, stuff earlier than that, or again, even that more recent material I mentioned earlier, but noting more of the high points of those records. Granted, there is something kind of left field and raw about the performances and the instrumentals on this thing. The random horse neighing samples, the colorful loops, the bold persona and really out there ad-libs. Machine Gun Money! This album almost vibes like Mad Villainy at a few points. So if Bronson was shooting for something that's a bit more loose, a bit more abstract, I can kind of respect that, but the thing is, this album is so lacking if it was going to be anywhere in that league of quality, because the instrumentals for the most part are kind of plain. They're pretty straightforward. They're not really all that wavy or texturally interesting. And sure, there are a few funny quotables on most of the tracks here, but it's not like the flows or the reference points or the wordplay are all that abstract or layered or intriguing. Mostly I'm feeling really on the fence with this record. I've heard Bronson put out worse tracks in the past, but I partially feel like the material on this record is so agreeable because he doesn't really string these songs out into anything. He doesn't really take any risks. He doesn't really try to do anything different. He plays it so safe and predictable that you can't really do anything other than just kind of like tap your foot to it and maybe giggle at a few lines that he says. Grab a record like Mr. Wonderful, take all the best tracks out of that, compile it into an EP, and you've already got a project that's at least 2 times better than this. I'm feeling a light to decent 5 on this thing. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video for you to check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Action Bronson, forever.